Hi, I'm Ruth Pierce. I'm the relationship maximizer, and I take the lessons that I've learned over the last several decades on how to make relationships better to help others with their relationships. And that's what I want to do today. We are doing session 4 of The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. And there's so much good nuggets in this book. And honestly, I read it the first time, probably over about 30 years ago, and it hit me then. And some of the stuff I still remember. But I noticed that each time I read this, I'm at a different place in my life, in my personal growth. And so the book hits me again in a different place. And that's what I want for you. So we are covering the second part of the first habit of be proactive. We're jumping in right now. We're going to talk about the circle of influence, the circle of concerns. So I want you to grab a piece of paper, and I'll give you a few minutes to write down things that you are concerned about, things that where you're at least taking mental energy out of you that are bothering you. So I'll give you about 2 minutes to do that. I'd say do at least 5. If you get more written down in that time, that's great. If you don't get quite 5, you can keep going as we go. I'm going to give you a few minutes to do that. Probably another 30 seconds. Okay, if you haven't quite finished, just keep it open. As things pop in your mind, write them down. But we'll be working with that list that you did as we go through this. And we're all on a continuum throughout our life, but then even from day to day on whether we're being reactive or proactive. And we can slip back and then one can move forward. And just know that's okay. That's the way growth happens. But these are some bullet points that I pulled out of Stephen Covey's book that I'm going to read to you now. But a good way to become more self-aware of how proactive you are is to look at where you focus your time and energy. Each of us has a wide range of concerns in our lives. This creates our circle of concerns. So if you have space on your list, you can draw a big circle around that and call that your circle of concerns. Some of the items in our circle of concerns, we do not have any control or influence over. Would you agree with that statement? When you look at your list, are there things on there that you don't have any control over or influence? I bet there is. So what you want to do, and you'll probably have to do this on the side, but create a smaller circle of the items you do have influence over. This becomes your circle of influence. And in that circle of the items that you already wrote down, move over there or rewrite them in there as far as which ones you do have influence over. Now, proactive people, remember you're on a continuum between being reactive and proactive, and the more proactive you are, you're going to focus your efforts in your circle of influence. not in their circle of concerns, the ones that you don't have any influence on. People that are proactive work on things they can do something about. In doing so, our circle of influence gets bigger and we see more results. The other side of the coin, reactive people focus their efforts in the circle of concern. They focus on the weaknesses of other people, the problems in the environment, and circumstances over which they have no control. This results in blaming and accusing attitudes, reactive language, like feeling like the victim. The negative energy that is caused here causes their circle of influence to shrink rather than increase. When we are working in our circle of concern, we empower the things within it to control us. We are not taking the proactive initiative necessary to effect positive change. But by working on ourselves, instead of worrying about conditions, we are able to influence the conditions. There's a lot there. Let's think about it and summarize it. We all have our circle of concerns, some of which we can control and some of them we can't. But within that circle of concerns, create this circle of influence of things that you do have influence over. And as you spend your time and energy in that circle of influence, it's going to get bigger. It's going to increase. And as it does, then you'll see more results. If you focus on the things that you cannot control, then that your circle of influence is going to get smaller and smaller because all your energies go into things you can't control. You ready to take this a step further? Stephen Covey talks about direct, indirect, and no control. Let's get some brief definitions and then we're going to talk a little bit more about them. Direct control, problems involving my own behavior. I have direct control over anything that involves my behavior. I'm going to take that a step further because our behavior is influenced by our beliefs. And I have control over what I believe. And we can change what we believe. Indirect control, problems involving other people's behavior. Sometimes we don't think we have influence on that, do we? But we do. And no control, problems we can do nothing about, such as our past or situation realities. So take a minute and go back to your original list and mark on there somehow what kind of control you have. Is it direct control, something that involves just you? Indirect, because it involves somebody else too? Or no control? And also, if you don't have anything on your list that would fit in each of those categories, think of something that's relevant to your life right now. And because you're doing this necessary work, the proactive approach, this proactive approach puts each one within your circle of influence. And we're going to go through why here as we do that. Because at first you say the one with no control, it can't be in there, but it can. Just hang on. Direct control problems, the one that's just you, are solved by working on our habits. And in this book, that's habits 1, 2, and 3. We're finishing 1 today. We'll handle 2 and 3 going forward. Indirect control problems are solved by changing our methods of influence. Habits 4, 5, and 6 of the book. Stephen Covey, by the way, has personally identified over 30 separate methods of human influence. 30 different methods. Most people only have 3 to 4 that they use, such as reasoning, and if that doesn't work, then moving to fight or flight. It is liberating to accept the idea that I can learn new methods of human influence instead of constantly trying to use old, ineffective methods to shape up someone else. So let me ask you this question. Are you open to learning some new methods? It won't be easy, but will it be worth it? I'm ready. How about you? No control problems involve taking the responsibility to smile and accept these problems and learn to live with them, even though we do not like them. And when we do that, we disempower them. And that's key. We don't push it under the rug. We recognize that it is what it is, but we don't let them take over us. We don't let them influence our weather, so to speak. Each of these first steps are within your circle of influence. Decide the direct, the indirect, and the no control. That's pretty heavy stuff. And I think that deal of the circle of influence and the direct, indirect, and no control are one of your huge takeaways from this session. From here, I've got some somewhat one-liners that I felt were important. So let's work through them. Proactive people, because that's what we want to be. In fact, use that as an identifier. Say, I am proactive. Are not pushy, aggressive, or insensitive. They are smart. They are value-driven. They read reality, and they know what's needed. So we're not hiding our head in the sand. We are smart. We are value-driven. We read reality, and they know what is needed. The proactive approach, this is changing subjects just a little bit, is to change from the inside out, to be different, and by being different, to affect positive change in what's out there. I can be more resourceful. I can be more diligent. I can be more creative. I can be more cooperative. But don't make it about performance. Make it about who you are as a being, who you are becoming. And you can use each of those phrases. You can put those as identifiers. I am more resourceful. I am more diligent. I am more creative. I am more cooperative. And this takes us back, this next statement takes us back to last session. Remember the phrase, we are responsible, response-able. We have the ability to respond in the way we want to respond, to control our lives and to powerfully influence our circumstance by working on who we are. It's inside out. It doesn't come from the outside. As proactive people, we carry our own physical or social weather with us. We can be happy and accept those things that at present we cannot control, while we focus our efforts on the things that we can. It's like being the thermostat when you walk into a room. You get to set what the weather, the temperatures, the climate's going to be. What you bring is so important. Now I'm going to go into a subtopic that Stephen Covey called the other side of the stick. And there's some truths here that are very important with all of this. I've got several bullet points and we'll just try to take them as slow as we need to. While we are free to choose our actions, we are not free to choose the consequences of those actions. The consequences are connected with the actions, and we can't change that. Consequences are governed by natural law. They are out in the circle of concern, not the circle of influence. When we are dishonest, the social consequence may vary depending on whether or not we're found out. The natural consequence to our basic character are a fixed result. What happens to me internally if I'm dishonest? I mess with my own integrity, don't I? Our behavior is governed by principles. Living in harmony with them brings positive consequences. Violating them brings negative consequences. We are free to choose our response in any situation, but in doing so, we choose the attached consequence too. And we're going to go back into the past. Realize that past mistakes are in the circle of concern, not influence. You don't have any influence on that anymore. We cannot recall them. We cannot undo them. We cannot control the consequences that came as a result. The proactive approach to a mistake is to acknowledge it instantly, correct and learn from it. This literally turns a failure into success. It will turn, it's that fall forward. If we do not choose to acknowledge a mistake, correct and learn from it, it puts a person on a self-deceiving, self-justifying path, often involving rationalization, which is really rational lies, to self and others. This second mistake, the cover-up, empowers the first mistake and causes deeper injury to self. Whoa. It's not what others do or even our own mistakes that hurt us the most. It is our response to them. Our response to any mistake affects the quality of the next moment. So our response to any mistake determines what's going to happen next. And we want it to be as proactive as possible. One of my mentors, not Stephen Covey, but another one, has a saying, our personal response to something, or our response to something, is more important than the something. Our response to something is almost always more important than the something. Our response is key. And this is moving to another subtopic on making and keeping commitments. At the heart of the circle of influence is our ability to make and keep commitments and promises not only to ourselves, but to others. And here's some bullet points when we're talking about responses so that we can think about it. And honestly, how we respond in each of this shows us how proactive we are. And the first one we've already talked about a little bit, but if we make and keep commitments not only to ourselves, because that was brought out in the mastermind today, how important that is. That shows that we are more proactive than reactive. Our proactivity also shows in how we handle a traffic jam. Are we going to get frustrated? Or are we going to see the brighter side, even though it's not what we wanted? Proactivity shows in how we respond to the irate customer or a disobedient child. Or put in the relationship that frustrated you this last week. It is how we view our problems and where we focus our energies. It's back to that circle of influence, isn't it? It's in the language we use. Is our language telling us that we are a victor or a victim? Proactivity shows in whether we are the light and not a judge, whether we are a model and not a critic, whether we're part of the solution and not part of the problem. It also shows when we don't argue for other people's weaknesses or our own. We don't excuse those. Proactivity shows when we admit mistakes instantly or soon and correct and learn from them as soon as possible. Proactivity shows when we do not use the blaming or accusing mode. It shows when we work on things I have control over. It shows when I'm working on me, on who I am becoming. I am a proactive person. And even if you're not there yet, start saying that to yourself. Say, I am a proactive person. I choose to be proactive. And these are two closing statements that we're going to go through. People who little by little exercise their proactive freedoms day by day, with little by little, will by little expand that freedom. People who little by little exercise their proactive freedoms day after day will little by little expand that freedom. And the flip side of that, people who do not will find that it withers until they are literally being lived. And that's literally Stephen Covey's phrase there. They are acting out the scripts written by parents, associates, and society. I don't want that in my life. I don't know about you. I am a proactive person. We are responsible for our effectiveness, our own happiness, and ultimately for most of our circumstances. And that is the end of session 4, the end of habit 1. Be proactive. Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And this is Ruth Pierce, Relationship Maximizer, signing off. Have a wonderful, proactive day.